Greetings and welcome, people. Well, it's been a while, and I say that in reference to me uploading videos. It's been an even shorter while since I've been out on the bike. Oh, excuse me. I was actually out on the bike a couple of times last week and just before that. Recorded some video, got home, loaded it up onto the computer to edit, and just didn't like it. Now, I expect some of you are probably saying, well, you feel the same way about most of the stuff I have uploaded, so why reject what I did in the last couple of weeks? I don't really know. I seem to have been in a bit of a funk over the last couple of months. I don't think it's anything related to stuff that's going on. I think it's just me. I just seem to have lost my motovlogging or motorcycling mojo and the ability to speak properly, apparently. But anyway, we seem to have got past that now. I'm here, I'm out on the bike. It's an absolutely beautiful afternoon, late afternoon, early evening. Also, I've decided to come out just at the wrong time, but there we go, I'm out on the bike and that's what matters. So a couple of little items to just idly chat about while I'm riding along, and hopefully you're enjoying this rather lovely, mostly blue sky, some puffy clouds up there, but mostly blue sky. And one of the things is, very small item, but could be a very important item, is that in one of my more recent videos I was quite pleased with myself about my summer mesh gloves that almost match the colour of my bike. Well, as you can see, I am wearing summer ventilated gloves, but they do not match the colour of my bike. I now have new gloves because I decided that ultimately that the other ones, being incredibly cheap off of not eBay, yes, I think they were off eBay actually, I decided that in the event of something happening, they were unlikely, good grief, unlikely to afford me much protection in the event of a spill. So Father's Day, some weeks ago now, or just before that, I gave my kids a little list of some ideas of things that I'd like if they felt so inclined to buy me a present. Not things that they must buy me, but things to suggest, same as we do for birthdays and Christmas. We write lists for these special occasions just to give the rest of the family inspiration and ideas for things to get if they're stuck. Doesn't mean they have to get things off that list, but if they want to get something else, that's fine. One of the things on that list was some leather summer gloves. These are on Amazon, and while they're not ultra expensive, they're a bit more than the other ones, and these being leather, goat leather, I think are more likely to enable me to keep the fingers and skin on my hands if I do come off the bike. And they do seem to be quite comfortable, not as free flowing with the airflow as the other ones, because the other ones, as I say, were mostly mesh, which was one of the things that did make me wonder about how protective they would be. But they seem to be enough. The other ones were very tight, and the plastic knuckle reinforcement in those other ones used to dig into my knuckles when I was holding onto the handlebars or pulling on the brakes, so they weren't very comfortable. So not only were they unlikely to be very protective, they were causing me discomfort in the meantime. So, hence the new gloves. And they seem to be doing quite nicely at the moment. I shall continue to let you know how they go, and I shall also put a link in the description below should anyone in the UK or anywhere else decide they like the look of them. They are also available in brown if you prefer the more classic look. If you're one of these people that I know it probably shouldn't go there, but one of these people that thinks if you ride a certain type of bike you have to dress in a certain fashion for it, but you know, that's your choice, your money. And the other thing was I was thinking, I know that's always a hazardous pastime, especially for people like me. I was thinking the other day that it's nearly 3 years since I started this channel, and yes, I know it's still only at 55 subscribers, or at least 55 visible subscribers, and that's not a problem, because I did make the decision right at the very beginning that I wasn't going to actively promote the channel. I wasn't going to go make a Facebook channel, or I have since gone on Instagram in a very small way, but not to push my videos like some people do, which that's fine, that's down to them, and they're obviously reaping the benefits of it because their channels are much bigger, and I wish them all the best. But the other thing that happened, or that I did just over about 3 years ago now, because I didn't start the channel until 3 years ago in September, but the other thing I did about now was to render my bike, my beautiful bike, a water-free zone. Yes, water-free zone. There is no water apart from no, there is no water on this bike, apart from what's in me, but I'm talking about the bike itself. Just concentrate on this a minute. Oh, that's what I'm talking about. Yes, now it's a very simple thing, but it was a decision I arrived at quite in a considered manner. I did think about it for a time, looked into all the options and what it was actually going to cost, and went ahead and did it. Now, what am I talking about? Now, a lot of you folks out there with your bikes, many of your machines are either air-cooled or air and water-cooled, but I suspect the vast majority of you what's the speed limit along here? The vast majority of you have not just oil cooling, but water cooling, liquid cooling, as this bike does. It has obviously a water jacket and a water pump and radiator and all that good stuff. Now, like most people who look after their cars and bikes, oh, excuse me, I obviously took care to change that water-based coolant and make sure it was at least the minimum mixture of additives, usual antifreeze, stuff like that. But there's two things with water-based coolant. Oh dear, excuse me. It needs to be replaced on a regular basis. Frequency of that basis depends on various factors, although it's not as variable as you might think, because the coolant additives, the antifreeze and that, will degrade over time, even if you just park the bike up in the garage. Obviously, using the bike and putting the coolant through heating and cooling cycles. Hang on a second, let me just concentrate here. Yep, okay, we're good. Will accelerate the degradation of the coolant, but at some point that coolant will need to be changed. It loses its efficacy, it loses the protective elements of the anti-corrosion functions, and so you need to replace it. Now, the other negative aspect of water-based coolants is just that, the water. The cooling systems, by their very nature, are pressurized systems, and part of the function of pressurizing that system is to raise the boiling point of the water. Obviously, if the system wasn't pressurized, as you drove around in your car or rode around on your bike, once the water got to boiling point, it would obviously boil, and eventually it would boil away and you'd be left with nothing in there, or very low, and you'd have to keep topping up. So, and of course, when water boils, it turns to steam. So with a pressurized system, that doesn't happen. So if a hose bursts, or you're not thinking about what you're doing and you inadvertently remove the pressure cap off the radiator or the expansion bottle while the system's still hot, you will be greeted by a huge sudden burst of steam and hot water blowing out of the system, because obviously once you remove that pressure, once you remove the constraint, all that water that's beyond boiling point that has been restrained from turning into steam will suddenly turn into steam. And of course the operation of the system anyway, as it's getting hot, puts pressure on all the other parts of the system, all the hoses and joints and things, and obviously on older machines like mine, which is 26 years old now, most of those components of the cooling system are, well, they're a quarter of a century old. I've already had to replace the water pump because the seal went and started leaking. And the other thing, of course, is that water as such is, or certainly water by itself, is not that great at moving large quantities of heat. Yes, it will do it. It's certainly more efficient than air. Although some argue that air is better because of the temperature differential between the hot fins and sides of the engine compared to the air around it. But anyway, that's discussions we had another day maybe. But the one of the things about, obviously, when water's coming up to boiling point, it starts to form bubbles. Now if you take a pan of water or a kettle, so you can keep the lid off, and put it on the heat, as that water gets to a certain point, you will see a fine film of small bubbles forming on the bottom surface of the water, where it touches the metal at the bottom of the pan. And at certain points that film of bubbles will actually cover the whole surface. Now essentially it's forming a layer of pretty much air between the water and the metal. And if you think about it, inside the cooling system of an engine, the surface of the cylinders on the water jacket side is like the inside of that pan or kettle. So as the engine heats up, the water touching the jacket, the liners or the cylinder walls, will start to form bubbles. Now under normal circumstances in that kettle or that pan, as the temperature builds up, more bubbles will be generated. It's basically just gases being forced out of the water by the heat. and as it gets hotter, the bubbles will get bigger, the gas will be released more quickly, the bubbles will join together to form bigger bubbles until you get to the point where those bubbles start to rise to the surface, and then you've got boiling water. Well, that's on an unpressurized pan or kettle. When you're in a system like in a car, in a motor vehicle engine, or any other form of pressurized cooling system, that boiling process doesn't happen, so you end up with basically a film of bubbles over the wall of the cylinders and then the other surfaces that get really hot, that is to an extent holding the water away from the hot surface that it's meant to be cooling. Now you can get additives. I think one of the more popular ones, certainly the ones that most of the guys over in the States will know, is water wetter. Now that has the effect, I believe, of reducing the surface tension so those bubbles don't form quite so readily, so the water can come into contact with the metal more easily, which is fine. And I promise I'm getting to the point fairly soon. Yeah. So that's what things like water wetter, race cool, things like that, that's what they do. They tend to reduce the surface tension, the ability of the water and other liquids to form bubbles as they get hot. And also the other possible downside is if you're living in an area where the piped water supply is hard water, it's got high levels of calcium in it. If your inside of your kettle scales up on a regular basis and you have to get rid of that scale, that means you live in a hard water area. If you happen to use tap water in your engine, in your cooling system on a regular basis, you will get scale forming up in certain areas inside the engine. Obviously that can lead to blockages. So essentially, I think the nub of what I'm saying is that using water-based coolants is effectively not that great an idea. Yes, it's been around for years. Provided you keep your maintenance up and use the right mix and good quality additives and things like that, you shouldn't have a problem. So you can't get away from the boiling water turning to steam, or trying to turn to steam fact. That is going to happen. Yes, it's very nice around here. So, what do you do about it? Well, basically you do what I did, which is to get rid of the water-based coolant and use a waterless or water-free coolant. And the one I decided to go for is one called Evans waterless coolant. Now, this is not a paid promotion. I am not receiving anything from Evans for this. I bought and paid for the coolant myself. And like I say, I put the coolant in the bike 3 years ago approximately now. And how has it been working? Well, you can see the temperature gauge is normal. There's no funny noises, there's no leakages, basically the best upgrade is one that doesn't give you any cause for concern. And ever since in the 3 years that I've had Evans in this bike, I have not had any cause to worry about it. It is, relatively speaking, quite expensive, because not only when you buy the coolant, you also, before you put it into the cooling system, you need to run some prep fluid through it. Basically what this prep fluid does is it's like a liquid sponge. It soaks up any residues of water, also gives the system a clean out, and that can be quite expensive, but it can be reused several times. So by the time you pay for the waterless coolant and the prep fluid, yes, it is a little bit pricey, but in theory, so far, touch wood, fingers crossed, it's a one-time purchase. Once you've installed that Evans waterless coolant in the cooling system, you don't have to change it. So I probably would be looking about now at changing the coolant if I was using a conventional water-based coolant, because it's been about 3 years. But I don't have to. And also the waterless coolant has a much lower freezing temperature than even the best water-based coolant antifreeze additive. And I think it has, and obviously it has a much higher boiling point, and that's it, because it doesn't boil at the temperatures that you would normally see a motor vehicle engine running at. Of course, the only thing that is a bit of a concern to me at times is what happens if I take this bike into a motorcycle shop for some work and they have to drain the system. Obviously I would have to state very clearly in advance when I took the machine in that there is Evans waterless coolant in the cooling system. If they have to drain it, they are to retain it and put it back in. And if they fail to do that, then I will be looking at them to replace not just the coolant but the prep fluid as well. Well, as far as they're concerned, I've used it several times, or may have used it. That's the other thing. If you've got several bikes, 2 or 3 bikes, you can use the same prep fluid on additional bikes. So if you've got several bikes, or if you and a couple of your friends who also have bikes want to do the same thing, you can chip in to purchase one set of prep fluid and save money that way. But hopefully the scenario of the fluid being drained and thrown away shouldn't be that likely to occur, seeing as I do most of the routine maintenance on this myself. The only thing that would be an issue is if I took it into a dealer or a motorbike repair place for something that is beyond my means or capabilities, and if I forgot to tell them, oh, nice car. But Porsche or Carmen gear. So yes, waterless coolant. Ow! Oh, bug just hit me in the right my chest, and that stung. It's a good job I'm not riding around the t-shirt. Oh God. Cyclists. Wearing my mesh jacket, which is probably not quite as protective as my full-on bike jacket. Excuse me. So yes, I suppose I would say I'm happy that I put the Evans waterless coolant in there. It hasn't given me extra horsepower, it hasn't given me extra fuel economy. But what it has given me is a degree of peace of mind that the cooling system in this bike is not under as much pressure as it used to be. It's protected from corrosion more than it used to be, and I don't have to worry about whether I need to change the coolant for any reason. So I think the extra money that it costs is worth it for those factors alone, really. So for any of you guys out there who've got liquid-cooled bikes, if you've ever considered going over to a waterless coolant, or if you have gone to a waterless coolant, I'd be interested to hear your experiences and your comments. And if you've used a different brand, or something other than Evans, I think other brands are available. So I'm not promoting Evans, I'm just saying that's the one I went for, and that's what's in my bike. So if you went for something different on yours, I'd be interested to hear why. Maybe it's just the more popular one in your locality. So with that, I think I'm going to call that an end to this particular video. Sorry if it's been a little bit boring again, but then again it is a Mighty Bean Stick video, so I guess that goes with the territory, really. So I'll just say thank you very much for taking a look, and I'll speak to you again on the next one. Cheerio for now. Bye.